slightly different from my usual videos, as instead of talking about a series or a piece of media that's already created, I'll be talking about something that is in the works. If you've followed me for a good while now, you'd know that I am in the works of writing a book series that will hopefully become a television show. I frequently post things about and included my characters as a way to introduce the public to the idea of my characters. So if you enjoy them, you can give me feedback. But I really haven't explained what I even created the series for. And that reason is really important to me. So how this will work is I'll explain why I even started writing and creating characters, what my show is meant to represent for people like me, and then an analysis on the cast, probably just the heroes, with a separate video all about the villains. So like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what you think about the story, because that's the whole point of this video. I want to hear your opinions about them, because eventually you'll be the one who'll get to read and view this when it goes public. So if you have any thoughts or potential theories, I always read your comments and suggestions, so they will be noted. Okay, if I'm being completely honest, I never thought I'd be writing a story. I originally thought I'd only be an artist, and even that decision came after a very long time. I wanted to fashion designer, but then I realized I didn't know crap about fashion brands, so I quickly dropped that idea. But I still love to draw. So I started following anime drawing tutorials on YouTube. Man, the joy I used to have whenever I drew a character and it actually looked like the original. But after a while, I started drawing my own character, nothing concrete, just random ideas I put together for practice. Then, and I know this is very random, but I grew up in the age of gacha YouTubers. So when I figured out what app people were using to make those videos, I made my very first character, Haruka. Originally, her name was not Haruka, and she wasn't even made for a separate story. Her name was Kuroe, literally just how you'd pronounce my name in Japanese. And she was a My Hero Academia self-insert. And before anyone judges me, I was 10 years old. I do still love MHA, but I'm a mature fan of the show now. Anyways, she went through a bunch of changes before I finally started separating her from MHA and made her a new character. And even then, she was originally going to be a mob boss? Yo, I don't know what I was thinking. And thankfully, I changed my mind and made her a regular teenager. Well, as much of a regular teenager can be for a fantasy story. So after I had her main concept down, found a draw 6 characters trend on Pinterest, I thought it was cool, but I didn't have 5 extra characters to draw. So, and I'm not joking, I just started making up random designs I thought looked good, and some of them I even based off of has-been hotel designs. Yeah, I had a very internet-fueled brain at that age. Once I made that drawing, I started drawing the characters separately and eventually gave them established designs and names. Now, I was gonna make it initially into a manga, but between you and me, I got tired of designing the scenes. I mean, not saying I would never do it, but I much prefer standard writing for these details. And here we are, years in, and I've completed a whole book and currently working on the second, with 4 more to come. If you can't tell, my journey has been very odd, but I wouldn't wish for anything different. Now, on to the reason why I even created my story. If you can't already tell from what I draw and what I've said, I'm a Black teenager and I write for people like me. Even if we now have plenty of representation for young Black kids in TV shows and movies, what about us teenagers? And what we do get is either heavily edited, scripted, or just overall not realistic. The overly ghetto stereotype that's put on Black teens is honestly getting exhausting. I'll use a sitcom style for an example. Most Black sitcom shows tend to have a police brutality episode, or just an episode with a crooked cop. While some shows do a good job at showing how a realistic encounter could go, others can either over-dramatize or undermine it for the sake of comedy or drama. Don't get me wrong, I love a good sitcom episode as much as The Last Person. But again, it's situational comedy. The most serious things still have to be made somewhat funny to fit the comedy aspects. And like I said, for the whole ghetto stereotype, of course, people like that do exist. But the way it's most often written, it's like every Black teen just is loud and belligerent. It's something that always disappoints me. Because why can't we be seen with proper representation and just what an adult views a teenager? Is it that hard to actually go off of what facts are about their lives instead of what you see? Whether it's intentional or not, teenagers in general are always painted as if we have no common sense. And I'm talking 15 plus, not preteens. Not saying they don't deserve representation as well, but that's not who I'm personally writing these for. I wanted to create my story as a way to get a view of Black teens from a Black teen. And as I'm writing, I'm referencing different local and worldwide events that happen and giving reactions I've actually seen. I want everyone to be able to enjoy my story, but it's really designed for people like me. Those teenagers that are paying a lot more attention to things that many don't expect them to. Those teenagers that may be a little more quiet, but have a lot to say. Those teenagers that use writing and art as an escape from life. Whether it's for their mental, physical, spiritual, all of it, they can find a character. Whether it's the appearance, backstory, personality, etc. and relate to it. I know for me, whenever I find a character in a show that's like me, it makes me feel seen and heard. That a lot of mainstream shows don't seem to do properly. And I'm talking to you, Disney, Paramount, Nickelodeon, especially Bet, all the major television companies, man. If I see another black sitcom where they have the hood son and social activist daughter combo, or the self-image centered daughter and unbelievably stupid son combo again, I'm a riot, I swear. When you can predict the family dynamic just by looking at it, that's when you know the stereotype has gotten old and tired. Even if my show isn't a sitcom, it's gonna have some moments, but I'd say it's closer to an Invincible. Much more serious topics being approached, but still having comedic moments, and it's catered to my southern black folks. I've already made some videos about the backstory of some of my characters and having some general facts about them, but that's all that can fit in a 1-minute video. So now with however long this video will be, I can write as many facts as I want about them, so it will basically be a whole new introduction to them and an update on some things that have changed a little bit. Haruka Michi Jefferson. Haruka was born to a Nigerian father named Abdul and a Japanese mother named Ryuku. Her father's side of the family held great love for Haruka, regardless of how they felt about her mother, but her mother's side of the family, well, it's hard to say they hated her. It was clear they didn't view her as anything more than Ryoko's daughter, not actual family. So naturally, she grew close with her father's side of the family before they moved to the United States when she was 6 years old. Abdul had a friend in Birmingham, Alabama named Celine, who Haruka was very close with, seen as family. So when her parents died in an unknown accident, Celine, alongside her husband Charlie, adopted the little girl without a second thought. It took Haruka a bit of time to adjust, but soon she called Celine Mama Celine and variations of it. As years passed, she got used to living in the deep South and got adjusted to her new life there in Alabama. But as she got older, she started getting these visions, but she didn't know what to call them initially. Most of the time, they were relevant to a big event in her life, like when Celine and Charlie got divorced, or when she got her first crush, anything that could possibly change the course of her life. For many years after that, this was a regular occurrence until a month after she turned 18, after her birthday. On September 17th, once the month changed to October, Haruka began getting the same vision every single night. She sat in a void, out of breath before a disembodied voice tells her that the time had come. Haruka attempts to find out what had come, only for the voice to say she'll figure out soon. This happens all the way until the beginning of the story, on Halloween Day, and kickstart the rest of the events of the series. She is called a soul weaver, which means someone who guides and leads lost souls back to their rightful place. They also are the ones who help stop haints. These are part of Southern folklore and are basically people who are stuck in a limbo between life and death. And soul weavers in my story help put them out of their misery. Many people in Father's family were soul weavers as well, including her father, grandfather, uncle, and Adaya briefly, who has an important role in the story as well. Haruka goes through a lot of mental and physical turmoil throughout the entirety in the story, and by the covers, you'll be able to see her slowly losing herself by the end, before taking a positive shift. All within the span of 2 to 3 years, mind you. She's confident, kind when she can, a little flirty, and very hard-headed. Homegirl won't stand for what she doesn't think is right. If she wasn't dealing with what happens in universe, she wasn't exactly sure what she'd do as a career, but most likely something dealing with restoration or beauty. She loves altering her clothes, learning about her cultures, and overall being a creative. Marie Diane Jowers. Marie was born as a twin to a French mother named Eloise and an American father named Jasper. She has 2 siblings, her twin brother Kaji and their older brother Marquise. Her parents were married for nearly a decade before divorcing when the twins were 9 and Marquise was 13. Eloise was cheating on Jasper for a handful of years before that, but they tried to make it work for the kids. But eventually, Jasper took Kaji and Marquise and moved, leaving Marie with Eloise. While one may say she wasn't abusive towards her child, Eloise definitely wasn't the best mother for Marie, constantly having different boyfriends, and overall just being judgmental. This caused Marie to gain resentment towards her mother. She doesn't hate her because that's her mom, but she most definitely doesn't like her as an actual person. Anyways, she met Haruka when she was 7 and Haruka was 6. Their friendship quickly budded after they met in the park with their parents, and Marie's siblings respectively. Even years later, when they were both 18, they still managed to keep their friendship strong, which is going to be needed for the rest of the story. Now, as far as her brothers, after they moved with their father, she rarely ever saw them. And if she did, it was most of the time be through FaceTime. Want to guess why? It was only because Eloise didn't want to talk to Jasper, which means she wouldn't tell him when Marie wanted to talk to Kaji and Marquise. It took Marie getting a phone from a family member that let her talk to her brothers, especially once Marquise went to college. As she was growing up, she gained a tough personality and exterior, not opening up to many people because she didn't feel like she could even bring up problems to her own mother. This was mainly through middle school and early high school years, but once she was around 16, she started to chill out. And she was getting in a lot of fights in school too. The front office didn't even have to call her name on the intercom at a certain point. And can you blame her? Kids were talking about her mom for cheating on her dad and having a bunch of boyfriends. Even if she didn't like her mom, she wasn't just going to let people trash talk her like that. At the beginning of the story, Marie is introduced alongside her brother Kaji and is very unapologetic but a lot nicer than she used to be. Her powers represent as scorching blue flames, which do cause her fingers to get a burnt black appearance at the fingertips. She uses her flames in a more traditional setting, like forming fireballs or punching someone with them. The main downside is that if these flames spread too much, like any other, they will burn, which means these flames can and will burn skin. If they can, so be very mindful not to let them spread up your own skin. If she wasn't put in the story, she always wanted to be an MMA fighter, or at least doing something productive with her fighting skills in general. Kaji Gabriel Jawes. Kaji was also born as a twin to a French mother named Eloise and an American father named Jasper. Even though he was born into the same family as Marie, their lives were drastically different. When their parents divorced and he and their brother Marquise went with their father, he naturally grew closer to his father, but tried his best to have a relationship with his mother as well. But like I said, with Eloise busy with her own life and boyfriends, she rarely had time for any of her 3 children. With his father's influence, Kaji grew up in sports and a strong passion for English literature and writing. He grew up playing almost every sport possible. Baseball, football, basketball, the works. But it was more just a fun hobby to do, and once his father realized that, he started catering to Kaji's other interests, which is when he got a love for writing. Now, I won't say Jasper was just the perfect parent, but he tried his best with Marquise and Kaji. Kaji also met Haruka when they were 7 and 6, but their relationship was different from her and his sister. While they were definitely friends, they also had a bit of a puppy love crush. So when Kaji had to move with his father, there definitely was some tears, but he made Marie promise to update Haruka about things going on. As he grew up, he gained a bit more of a flirtatious and playful personality, but never dated anyone because he knew his heart wouldn't be in it. He's definitely that friend in school that you would guess has had hundreds of partners, but hasn't done a damn thing. So imagine his surprise when he moved back with his siblings and his father. Haruka is still single and is a baddie. Trust me, the feeling was mutual on both sides. Kaji is introduced alongside Marie, and as I said, has a flirty and playful personality, but can definitely take things seriously when he needs to. He has similar powers to his sister, but instead of using his flames more directly, he channels them through a weapon as almost a holding device. For example, if he uses a gun, he can heat the bullets up or just pool flames around the bullet for a more direct hit. Unfortunately, his fate is a lot more tragic, but does have a positive outcome in the end. By the end of the story, I won't spill all of the details of the buildup. I haven't even written that yet. He is killed by his own flames in an attack. But if you remember what I told you about Haruka, a part of being a soul weaver is that they can pull souls from the dead and revive them. And long story short, she does it, and Kaji is back in the land of the living. Albeit scarred, but still alive, and him and Haruka get a sweet, happy ending. If he wasn't in the events of the story, he'd want to be an author for a wide range of genres, but mainly he'd write romance novels. He's a lover boy at heart. James Pierre Adams. James Jr., otherwise known as Jamie, was born to American parents, specifically from Georgia, named James Sr. and Grace. He was always the studious kid, having an affinity for coding and computers since he was around 9 years old. Even if he was a bit more quiet and academic, he really wasn't bullied. I mean, maybe an occasional tease or mocking jab, but not nearly as bad as it can be portrayed in movies. His parents were strict, wanting to ensure their son's success, but ended up causing a lot more stress for Jamie and his older sister, Bethany, with their standards. This mainly came from James Sr. Because he was a scholar and became a college professor, he wanted both his kids to follow in his footsteps, either becoming a professor like himself or something in a similar regard. While this isn't necessarily bad, It was the way he pushed for this profession that caused some resentment from Bethany and Jamie. Bethany did end up becoming a teacher, but for more personal reasons, and while Jamie mainly focused on building programs. This got him in trouble, though, due to a teacher in high school. This teacher was named Miss Alicia, and she was not an actual teacher, but I'll go more into her in the next video. She had Jamie begin working on a program named Sky.exe. Of course, he thought this was some desk assistant or something similar, but this was actually basically the mind of one of the villains in the story. She also gave Jamie this drug, something that sounds similar to Adderall, but with supernatural mess on top of it. Since he didn't need this, it altered his brain chemistry, in a very strange way, mind you. You see, he had a crush on Marie since middle school, just an innocent little crush that naturally built into high school. When he took this drug, however, this turned into obsession. So on the outside, he just looked a bit more confident than usual, but in private and in his mind, it was practically an obsession factory. He met Haruka in middle school, and while they weren't close, they were more so of acquaintances and became actual friends in high school. He doesn't have any powers, but an effect attached to him is his obsession. The only real sign is that whenever these thoughts pool in his mind, bright pink veins appear on his neck, hands under the eye, jaw, and other small areas, but are hardly noticeable. He is a vital character in the second book, so if you would be looking for information on the villain in that book, it will come from him most likely. If Jamie wasn't in the events of the story, he would want to be a coding specialist. So whether it was for an app, a company, or even solo projects, he wanted to create the coding. And yes, before I hear it in the comments, I did write a nerd character because it's tradition in a high school story, but I made him unique, so I don't want to hear a freaking thing about it. Lilith Ellie Baker. Lilith, otherwise known as Lily, was born to American parents, specifically Louisianian, named Bernard and Diana, and has an older sister named Rosalie and a little sister named Pearline, also called Pearl. Their parents were very work-oriented, still very loving to their daughters, but most often busy working. Diana worked in a restaurant, co-owner of it with her sister, and Bernard worked your standard 9 to 5. Since they were working 85% of the time, Rosalie stepped up as a third parent for Lily and Pearl. Rosalie actually learned about their cultural background from her aunt in learning voodoo and witchcraft, but she kept that secret from her parents. Lily, on the other hand, was aware of this, but used this knowledge once she was older, but that's for later. Lily grew up on the heavier side. I mean, when your mom works in a restaurant, you're gonna sample what she brings home. But she didn't let that get to her. Not to say she never had insecurities, as we all do, but she learned to embrace that about herself, and even followed in her mom's footsteps. Instead of regular dishes, though, she focused on the sweeter side of things. She wanted to open a bakery. I mean, she was already baking stuff for neighbors and school events, and they paid pretty well. She knew what she was doing. And secretly, a lot of people thought she didn't, or that at least she was just this sweet girl who saw the world as cupcakes and rainbows. They were dead wrong. Like I mentioned, she learned about what Rosalie was doing around the age of 12. So for people Rosalie was helping, Lily would make desserts fueled with her sister's magic for special clients. Now, she didn't do this for the rest of her baked goods. This was only for people who asked for them. She met Haruka their freshman year of high school. Initially, they were just friends in a group, but they actually became closer friends within that first year. Lily's love interest, her childhood friend named Daniel. She had a crush on him pretty early in their friendship, but didn't want to ruin a good thing with romance. Little did she know, the feelings were definitely mutual, but she wouldn't find this out for a good while. Her powers are under the umbrella term of vampire-like, but specifically she is similar to what is a revenant. Revenants are undead spirits that are bloodthirsty and driven by insatiable hunger. Whenever she smells blood, it builds a frenzy in her brain and makes her go ravenous. Now, obviously, she isn't an actual revenant, but she has the power set of them and uses a mallet, similar to Harley Quinn, to avoid just straight up biting people. And I know I said she was a haint, but I did more research and the term would actually be revenant. If she wasn't in her role in the story, of course she'd be a baker, specializing in cakes and pies most likely. To be honest, if you need another character to compare her to as a similar type, go with Constance from RTC. Daniel Martinez. Daniel was born to an American mother named Carmen and a Puerto Rican father named Paul. Daniel always had a love for photography and illustration, which makes sense from his parents being artists. Carmen was a painter, often hosting exhibits in museums alongside Paul, who focused on photography, mainly family memories or just beautiful landscapes. But unfortunately, Daniel didn't have as much time as he wished. He could have to have his mother teach him all she knew about painting. Carmen, through the very early years of Daniel's life, unknowingly had cancer and by the time they caught it when he was 10, it was already too late and she passed in her sleep. In honor of his mother and to blend his parents' passions, he photographed things he thought his mother would love and paint different aspects of the photo to set at grave as an offering every year on her birthday and death date. With Carmen's passing, Paul was the only parent, so Daniel had to kind of raise himself with his father working. But this didn't bother him as he still had support from other family members and friends. But this photography hobby came with a surprising consequence. As he grew older, he started noticing these little orbs of light appearing in the background of photos. Sometimes it looked like an eye, a mouth, or just a dust particle. He definitely noticed this but thought very little of it. But little did he know this would be very relevant and essential in these next few years after high school. Lily is Daniel's love interest. And like I said, he had a crush on her as well, but thought he'd ruin the friendship by confessing. But he was supportive of her baking, even taking photos to help format a business for her once she could get started. Plus, taking pictures for her whenever she fell down. And just needed something to brighten her mood. He met Haruka in sophomore year of high school. Definitely a friend and cares about her, but not extremely close. As I alluded to, Daniel has the ability to photograph spirits and other supernatural phenomena, but he won't be aware of this fact until around the 4th book. So he doesn't have powers in the traditional sense, but still powers somewhat. Obviously, if he wasn't in his role in the story, he'd be a photographer like his father and potentially go into business with Lily as a designer of some sort. Fun fact, Daniel was the last character I made when making the main cast. Not that he is the least important by any means. I wanted Daniel to be a contrast to Lily, hence making them have different aesthetics and color schemes, but didn't want to make them so different it was like a cringe Wattpad story. You know the ones I'm talking about. So, I just have a few more points I'd like to make in this video. Pretend this is for a job and y'all are my bosses? I swear, this pitch will be amazing. Alright, I won't say there aren't plenty of media that show great representation. One of my biggest inspirations are from a book series named Blood Like Fate and Blood Like Magic, written by Lucille Sambury. If you haven't read these books, highly recommend as good books in general. But also, these 2 books inspired a good handful of my writing decisions. As far as TV shows, Boondocks, Black Dynamite, multiple different animes, these mainly guided how I wanted the story to be presented. If it got turned into a TV show, maybe not as raunchy as the Boondocks, but definitely just as iconic. And even in video games, while some companies don't really show that much depth for black characters, Hoyoverse, many others do an amazing job at this. One of my favorite video games, period, is South of Midnight. If you haven't played this game and are looking for a good story that has a female lead, 2, is rich in Southern folklore, and 3, has one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. Go play it. I honestly might replay the game again this summer just from how much I enjoyed it. Main point is that there are tons of good representation, so I'm not saying that there is nothing already created. I'm just saying there could be more. And I know I'm not the first person to ever say this, and definitely won't be the last. But hopefully the more people talk about this, the more this stuff starts to happen and not just be an idea in someone's head. Also, I got a little bone to pick with how some people be on social media. I have noticed that handfuls of artists and even just creators getting backlash for creating stories about people that look like themselves. A channel that I love going to for this on YouTube is @TobyWeaver Jr. Honestly, would love for him to voice a character in my story. But anyways, in one of his videos, he mentions a black manga company and a black game developer are planning on creating what looks to be a fighting game with a diverse cast. Sounds good, right? Well, people on Twitter are calling them slurs because it isn't authentic to Japanese culture, and majority of these people aren't even Japanese. I understand cultural appropriation is not okay, but if you aren't even of that culture, you can't just go around saying what you think this whole group of people are thinking. And even if you are of that culture, you can't be the face for the entire thing. You can give your personal opinion, but not for everyone else. And this gets even worse when we get to cosplayers. A few that I love are at Eden's Garden Co's and at Snickerdoodle-chan. Both very talented people who cosplay a variety of characters from Super Mario to Demon Slayer. But some people go in their comments saying that their cosplays are inaccurate because they're black, and most of the time style the character's hair as if the character was black as well. Or even worse, they get called slurs for it. I'm sorry, since when was something wrong when someone whose skin tone matches a character, and why is it wrong when someone who doesn't have the same skin tone to do it? Even when people cosplay characters that are people of color on the verge of blackface, rarely somebody says anything. It makes my blood boil hearing about all of this. And then it's swept under the rug like it was insignificant. I understand there are more important things, especially right now, that hang heavier than just social media. but that doesn't mean they are completely pointless and not worth talking about. Alright, I just ranted my heart out, so now for something lighter. Something I want to eventually make through the channel is an ARG. If you don't already know what that means, it stands for an augmented reality game, which just means that to solve it, you have to go outside of the original media to solve a puzzle of some sort. The most known would most likely be the one created from Gravity Falls. Now, if I made one, it would be years in the making as planning out everything for one of these ARGs. You have to write a story, create all the connected links. If you want it to spread to websites, you have to create that. While I'd love to make one, that is a crap ton of work. And to be honest, I'd want to make it as a collab project with other creators. I have no clue who it would be, but I think that would be an amazing opportunity. I might find creators to collab with later down the line, as again, I'm only a year in with all of this, but that's a potential thought. Something that is a little bit more concrete. Most likely within the next year or so, depending on school, I may start doing commissions. I still have to make a pricing chart and all of that, but I definitely would want to start those soon. Probably will do chibis, busts, waist up, and full body. And then the usual sketch, line art, or color. Okay, I think that's it. Now, like I said, this will have a second part eventually, but as for right now, that's it. Let me know in the comments about things you'd want videos about, any potential questions you may have about characters, your opinions on what I mentioned in this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, babes.